Hi there, my name is Kaylee Spears and I work for the Arkansas Department of Health. Some of you guys might recognize me, some of you may not, but my role with the Arkansas Department of Health is a little bit different maybe than what you have kind of been hearing about on the news, especially with the coronavirus pandemic that's happening. I'm not a nurse and my job looks kind of like what I'm doing today, but mostly what it involves is going into schools and providing prevention education a lot of times in health classes, which may be why you are watching this video today in the first place. So because you guys aren't in school, presentations look a little bit different for me as well. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition, but specifically kind of that transition from what nutrition looks like in your life right now, probably living at home with your family, with your parents, and then what happens when you graduate and become more autonomous in kind of the decisions that you make in regards to your nutrition and really your overall lifestyle. And so we're just going to kind of go through this presentation like I would as if I was in a classroom. I'm actually going to minimize myself just so I don't distract you as we go through it. But this slide just kind of outlines the standards that the Department of Education requires for you all to meet in your health classes throughout your K through 12 years. As you can see, the 9th through 12th grade is kind of where we're at today and what we're focusing on, being able to evaluate your personal eating habits and patterns, and then being able to identify unhealthy nutrition choices in yourself and in others, and determine the warning signs of unhealthy choices and disorders related to nutrition. So we're going to talk about all of that today. And unfortunately, you don't really get the opportunity in this type of learning environment to ask questions directly, but please feel free if you're watching this video to kind of comment if you have any questions or connect back with your health teacher, and I'm sure they'll be able to kind of answer any questions that may arise from this presentation as well. So what is kind of your definition of health? Take a second and kind of think through, what does health mean to you? What I want you to know is that in this presentation, and really anytime I come to speak to you in a classroom setting, or if it means creating more videos like this, that there is never kind of an agenda for me to tell you what is right or what's wrong, what to do or what not to do. Really, my purpose is to give you accurate information, then to be able to take to make good and healthy choices for yourself. And ultimately, health involves far more than what we will actually get to talk about today. It's multifaceted, and nutrition really is a very small subcategory of overall health. Everything that we talk about are really just recommendations that may look different for each person. Something that works for you in regards to nutrition may not work for your friend or someone else who's watching this video as well. What we do know in regards to your guys' age bracket is that young adults are at a crucial stage in their development. And as you guys transition from parental control over lifestyle behaviors to assuming responsibility for your own health choices, that just kind of requires a little bit more information and education in making those decisions. So what we do know is that college students tend to partake in a lot of risky behaviors, right? Tobacco and drug and even sexual health type of decisions ultimately become the focus of prevention in a college setting, but ultimately nutrition is something that's just as important. A lot of times college students are and unhealthily dieting, skipping meals, consuming a lot of fast foods, and actually have a relatively low intake of fruits and vegetables. A lot of times unwanted weight gain does actually happen within the 18 to 34 year age range. It really can happen at any time, but that's most predominantly when it does happen. In a study that was done, college freshmen, it was understood that they have a low knowledge of things like nutrients, food labels, and groups of foods, which is really just kind of a foundational concept of nutrition. And then in Arkansas specifically, greater than 21% of high school students and 37% of adults are considered obese. And so that just kind of confirms this conversation that we're having today, that it's important, that it's necessary, and that hopefully as people become more educated on making healthy decisions for themselves, that we can start to kind of see a decrease in those numbers as well. So energy balance is really kind of another foundational thing when it comes to nutrition, overall physical wellness as well. So what do you already know about energy balance, and why do you maybe think that it's important? Take a second and think, do you understand what I mean by saying the term energy balance? So energy balance really does have a lot to do with calories. Human beings need energy to survive, to breathe, to move, to pump blood, to think. And we get this energy from the calories in the food that we eat and the beverages that we drink. Energy balance is the balance of calories consumed with calories burned. So energy in and energy out, making sure that that's a balance is really important. And it's not necessarily just a balance in each day to day, but a balance over time that really does have a significant impact on our overall wellness. Things like empty calories, these are things that can come from foods that don't necessarily fuel our bodies to do the things that it needs to do. They provide little to no nutrients, and a lot of times they do come from solid fats and added sugars. And we really have to be careful about our empty calorie intake because a lot of times it'll just store in our body and it won't actually be used. So more in than more out over time equals a weight gain. More out more than in over time is a weight loss typically. And so it really is kind of that simple. And we'll talk about why it's important to remember both in and out and how that affects our overall wellness. How many calories do you have to burn to lose 1 pound or 20 pounds? This is kind of something that you'll hear a lot of people kind of casually throw out, that they'd like to lose weight, they'd like to lose 1 pound or 5 pounds, or even sometimes people will be lofty and saying that they want to lose 20 pounds. And I think a lot of times we don't necessarily understand how much that will actually require of us to be able to burn that. So it's actually, you have to burn 3,500 calories to lose a pound of weight, or 70,000 calories to lose 20 pounds of weight. That's about 700 miles. And so understanding that keeping this energy balance over time is really the only thing that's going to slowly start to have an effect on things like losing or gaining weight. So motivators and barriers, kind of this question of what prevents us from making these healthy choices when it comes to what we eat and drink. Because we know, like what we just talked about, we know that we need to expend more energy than we're consuming. But what types of things stand in the way of us doing that? Just because we know something in our head doesn't mean that we're actually going to do it. And so it's important for us to discuss things that may deter or stop us from making these healthy choices in our own lives. A few things that I think of as being potential barriers are time, a lack of time maybe. You don't have time to go to the grocery store. Maybe you don't have time to prepare the food if you're working multiple jobs or if you're a student. There are a lot of barriers in regards to time that may make it more difficult for us to make healthy choices. Maybe it's a limited availability of healthy foods. We know that not everybody has access or availability of these foods. I think about kind of the pandemic situation that we're living in right now, and that food is kind of a limited resource right now. Going to the grocery store and getting things like fresh produce are much more difficult than they were, gosh, even a month ago. There are also areas of communities and towns and states where they're considered food deserts or food swamps, which means that access to healthy foods is very, very difficult, if existent at all. A lack of concern regarding healthy eating is kind of this perception of whether or not we believe that the foods that we eat do kind of affect our overall health. Maybe there's a taste preference where you don't necessarily enjoy the way that healthier foods taste, and that can certainly be a barrier as well. Cost and money. We know for the most part that healthier foods can be more expensive than those faster, more convenient type foods. I do think that it is possible to make healthier choices even with limited funds, but we know that this isn't necessarily the case for everybody. So then what would encourage you to make healthy choices when it comes to what you eat and drink? We just talked about the barriers. What might be motivators to you making these healthier choices? A few things that come to mind. Having support from your friends and your family, doing things together, having a community feel really does motivate you in all different types of things, not just necessarily making healthy choices with what we eat and drink. I think about tobacco users who are in a community with other people who are trying to strive to quit is a motivator to continue after that goal, which kind of goes to point three. Having a goal to achieve is really important as well. And with that goal, having support and community can definitely be a positive motivator towards achieving that. Having wider access or availability of these healthy foods, that kind of goes back to that limited availability. If we had more food accessible, then of course it's going to be easier for us to make those choices, right? If all we have on a street in our town is fast food options and we don't have any availability of healthy, fresh produce or food, even if you want to make that choice, it's not possible for you to be able to. A lot of towns in Arkansas are kind of in that situation where they don't really even have the ability to make those choices because of the foods that are present in their communities. And then improving or maintaining some type of appearance. This really shouldn't be our only motivating factor, but if it's something that kind of gets you going towards your goals, it may be a good contributor to these motivators as well. Then kind of this question of how will these change or stay the same after you graduate? Maybe you have lived in a home where your parents only buy certain types of foods. Maybe they've been really, really healthy and good foods. And so it's kind of encouraged you to, or really forced you in, I guess, to making healthier choices with the foods that you eat. Or maybe the opposite of that. Maybe they only buy foods that maybe are kind of those sometimes foods where they're highly processed and have a lot of those kind of unhealthy fats or sugars in them as well. You have then the opportunity when you live on your own to make different choices. And so you may be motivated in new ways, but you may also have more barriers, right? Maybe if you're a full-time college student, you used to have time to be able to make healthy choices, and now you don't necessarily have as much time. So understand how that might change after you graduate as well. Okay, so reading food labels is another one of these kind of foundational things that we need to understand about nutrition. Food labels can be really confusing because of what all is going on, especially if it's never kind of been broken down to you. So I'd like to ask you the question, do you even pay attention to the food labels that you maybe are buying, or maybe the drink labels that you're buying and consuming as well? A lot of times people don't. I'm guilty of not all the time. But just a few things to pay attention to when you are reading these food labels. One is to beware of the front label tease. So I don't actually have a picture of this on the slide, but manufacturers can kind of put whatever they want on the front of packaging, things like heart healthy or low fat or enriched with calcium and vitamins. They don't necessarily have to back that up with what is actually present in their product. So beware to not necessarily trust what you see on the front of a package. Make sure you turn it around and you do look at that nutrition label. Check the serving size. So up at the top where it says servings per container, this says 2. That means that within this container of food, whatever it is, that technically there are 2 different servings that can be consumed of this product. So let's say we have a kind of a package of oatmeal or something like that. If it says that there are 2 servings, then that means technically you should only be consuming half of that package in one sitting. And what we know about that is that a lot of times these serving sizes aren't super realistic to the amount of food that we are actually used to eating. And we'll talk about portion size in a second, but make sure that you're checking that serving size. Things that we drink, a lot of times we don't realize that the servings aren't necessarily 1 per container. So when you buy a bottle of soda or a bottle of even like chocolate milk, a lot of times there'll be multiple servings within that container, but we know that we're consuming the whole thing in one serving. So that actually changes all of these values on this nutrition fact label. If it says 250 calories, but I'm eating the entire thing of oatmeal or drinking the entire soda, and you actually have to multiply that by 2, and you'd be consuming 500 calories if you consume that whole package. And so that's kind of confusing, but there is some math involved. Just make sure that you're checking that serving size per container. And then nutrients by weight or percentage of daily value. This refers to the recommended allowance for nutrient based on a 2,000 calorie diet. And so really those are just recommendations, but that's those purple numbers there. And they can kind of help you keep track of things like sodium or cholesterol, especially if you are, or carbs, if you're having to pay attention to that. The ingredient list is at the very bottom there. It's where it lists the ingredients, and they're listed in order from greatest amount to least. So in this example, it says whole grain oats are the very first ingredient. That means in whatever product this is, whole grain oats can take up most of that ingredient list. And so for the most part, the fewer ingredients that are listed, typically that means it's a healthier choice. That means there is less processing that goes on to create this food, and it has less additives and things that are unnecessary added to that food. And then lastly, don't overlook the sugar. The sugar is listed right there below dietary fibers, how many grams of sugar, but we can't just stop there. Make sure that you're looking at the disguise names that are in that ingredient list. Things like brown sugar, cane sugar, dextrose, corn syrup, fructose, fruit juice, really any of those things that end in OSE indicate some type of sugar, but we don't necessarily know that unless somebody has told us those things. Okay, so my plate recommendations. I'm sure at some point you guys have seen a my plate diagram, whether that's in your cafeteria or maybe even in your classroom or when you were really young. This is something that's taught at a very young age, but it really applies all the way through life. It doesn't, the way that a plate looks when we're young really shouldn't change as we get older as well. Really, half of our food should be vegetables and fruits throughout the day, and then the other half should be divided between those lean proteins and the whole grains. It's really important too that we kind of diversify the foods that we're eating, making sure that we have vegetables and fruits of different colors. Those provide different types of nutrients and vitamins. Fiber is a really important thing that we get from our fruits and our vegetables that helps us digest. As Americans, a lot of times we overeat on protein and grains, and we undereat vegetables and fruits. And so just remembering that this is a really good visual for when you are actually creating what your plate will look like. And as you get older, as you get into college and you walk into those dining halls, or maybe you are working and you're cooking on your own, this really does kind of give you an idea of what we should strive for our plates to look like. Okay, so portion size is the amount of food or drink that a person chooses to eat or drink at one time. And so it's really, unfortunately, difficult for us to understand portion size, especially because the way that we were raised to kind of create our plate becomes super normal for us. And if we weren't raised by understanding proper portion sizes of different types of foods, then that is kind of ingrained into how we put a plate together. And so you can see this little guide to the right that gives us ideas of specific portions of things. So the size of your palm is about 3 ounces. That's kind of where your protein should be. A fist is about a cup. Things like rice and pasta, fruit and vegetables. A cupped hand is about half a cup. That's things like beans and potatoes. Those are kind of your starchier foods. 2 cupped hands is about an ounce. And that's really how much we should have of things like chips and popcorn and pretzels and servings. And so we know that a lot of these aren't super realistic with the way that we do normally eat food. And why is this so hard for us to understand kind of what a healthy portion is. Some of these things are internal, meaning it relates to our control over the way that we put food together. But a lot of times the way that we view portions comes from an external source, meaning it's things that are kind of outside of our control. We haven't had control over these things like restaurants serving large meals to us, sometimes enough even for two people. Our dishware has actually grown, meaning when plates get bigger, naturally our food starts to take up more surface area on that plate, which then means our portion sizes grow. Food is also manufactured and packaged in large sizes. So when you go to the grocery store, you don't really have control over the size of the bagels that you're buying. You may have control over whether or not you are eating the whole bagel, but the actual manufacturing of that label has changed significantly over time, and that really does affect the way that we view portions. This is a little kind of game activity. It's just a good reminder of some of those external changes that have happened with portion control. So a pepperoni pizza 20 years ago in the year 2000, 2 slices of pepperoni pizza were about 500 calories. So take a guess what you think now in 2020, 2 slices of pepperoni pizza would be. 850 calories. So we can see 350 calories more than what it looked like before. And a lot of that has to do with just how much bigger the serving size of a pizza has grown. Popcorn, I clicked a little early, but 20 years ago, a box of popcorn at the movie theater is about 270 calories. And now when we go, we know we're getting that big boxer bag that's maybe even refillable, and we can see kind of how it's even more than doubled the amount of calories that we're getting in popcorn now. A bagel 20 years ago was about 3 inches in diameter, about 140 calories, and today it's about 6 inches. And so we see that diameter double, and then we also see that in the amount of calories that we consume as well. And so, like I said, these are external things. You're not necessarily controlling how big they're making that pizza. You may be able to control how much popcorn you're putting in your bag at the grocery store, but you aren't necessarily going to be able to control the manufacturing of that. Okay, so mindful eating is maybe a new idea for you guys. Mindful eating is, I really like this quote. It's saying, mindful eating is a way for us to become reacquainted with the guidance of your inner nutritionist. And so a lot of times, right, we turn to other people to tell us what is best for us to be eating. We even turn to things like social media or bloggers to get their guidance. But really, we all have the ability inside ourselves to know what our bodies need. It's just really hard for us to listen because we aren't necessarily taking the time to listen to what it's saying. And so mindful eating is really helpful for that. So a few tips to kind of support this idea of mindful eating is just trying to avoid distractions when you're eating, making sure that you are kind of setting intention for the time to eat, that maybe you're not also multitasking and doing other things. It's helpful to sit down at a table, to actually sit in a chair, not to be standing up at a desk or a surface, or maybe even walking around. You may even think about how you're feeling when you're eating, and maybe think about how different things throughout the day have made you feel, whether or not you are kind of intentionally eating a meal, or maybe if the food is kind of acting as a coping mechanism for things that have happened throughout the day. Eating slowly and chewing well is really important. It allows your body to digest better, and then gives you enough time then to kind of think through whether or not you are still actually hungry. Putting your utensils down in between bites is also helpful for kind of that slowing down. And then to stop eating when you're full, which is so much easier to say than to actually do, because like I said earlier, it takes time for our body to signal to us that it is full and that it has enough food. And so unless you allow your body that time to kind of communicate that to you, you're not necessarily going to know when to stop. Benefits of mindful eating, we kind of talked about these throughout, but it allows you to be present. It really does help with the digestion of the food. It reduces overeating and even anxious thoughts associated with food and kind of meal time. And then it helps you to listen to your body and to really understand that inner nutritionist and what it's trying to tell you. Okay, so disordered eating and fad diets. We talked about at the beginning how this is a requirement of those standards that we talk about. What does disordered eating look like? Disordered eating is a real and life-threatening illness that is potentially fatal in some situations. It involves extreme emotions, attitudes, behaviors surrounding food, weight, and body size. And there's kind of this false belief that most people with eating disorders are privileged young white women. While eating disorders do affect these people, they also affect men and transgendered people, people of color, older people, younger people, people with disabilities, literally every walk of life. And stereotyping eating disorders as exclusive to only one group is a disservice to the diverse group of people who are affected by these. And then it perpetuates the stigma that prevents people from actually getting help. And so some of these disordered eating kind of categories or diagnoses: anorexia, which is just a strict limitation on eating. Bulimia involves a type of purging that happens after eating. And then binge eating disorders may be one that you've never heard of before. It's characterized by a session of binge eating, but it differs from bulimia in that there is no purging. A lot of times people feel out of control and distressed. And it's actually the most common eating disorder in the United States, but it's misunderstood a lot of times as just overeating. It's important to know that binge eating disorder is not a choice, and it does have a significant psychological impact on the person who is suffering from it. And the reason why we talk about fad diets at the same time that we do talk about disordered eating is because a lot of times these fad diets kind of perpetuate these ideas that initiate disordered eating. A lot of times they're stylish weight loss plans that they promise dramatic results, and they're not usually healthy. They may even perpetuate disordered eating, and they don't often result in long-term success in weight loss or whatever it is that you're trying to strive for. A few things to look out for with these fad diets: things that claim to help you lose weight very quickly, like more than 1 to 2 pounds a week. It does take time to lose weight and to allow your body to adjust. That's just a normal functioning of the way that our bodies work. If they're promising that you'll lose weight and keep it off without any exercise, remember, we go back to that energy balance. We know that energy out is a really important part of kind of maintaining a healthy weight. If they're telling you to cut out an entire food group or even limiting your food choices, and they don't necessarily offer that balanced nutrition. If they make their claims on before and after photos, or if they're asking you for a lot of money up front, a lot of times these can kind of be hoaxes to just kind of get you into falling for whatever it is that their kind of scheme is in these bad diet situations. Okay, so we're just going to kind of go through a few kind of shopping tips and tips for eating out and tips for what nutrition looks like in college. But when it comes to shopping, always try to plan your meals ahead of time. Make a shopping list before you go. You'll not only be more likely to prepare healthier meals, but you'll save money at the store as well. The freshest foods, like things like your dairy, your produce, and your meat, are all on the outside walls of the store. So make an effort to purchase most of your foods there and spend less time shopping in the internal aisles. Look at and compare those food labels like we talked about, even among different brands. Sometimes we think that there aren't many differences between same foods, but that's not necessarily the case, especially when we look at those ingredients. Be careful of those claims that are made on the front of packages like we talked about. Read the ingredients. Remember, if it's something that you can't pronounce, that it's probably not necessarily something that you want to eat. And really, we should limit the amount of processed foods that we are consuming. Only buying what you need is going to help you help with overeating, but then also help with kind of saving, sticking to your budget. Next is just a few things to consider when you're eating out. Restaurant portions tend to be large. Consider splitting a dish with your friend. Maybe look at the menu and review kind of the calorie content on foods or meals. A lot of times this is really eye-opening for us to be able to see how much food we are actually getting and what the calorie component to that is. Maybe choose a lighter fare. A lot of restaurants will have lighter fare choices or healthier choices sectioned out on the menu. Try to order your way, meaning don't be afraid to customize. Don't be afraid to ask your waitress or your waiter if you can switch things out or do substitutes. A lot of times they will be super willing to kind of be flexible in the way that they put meals together. Avoid overeating. A lot of times, because of those large portion sizes, and because we're sitting maybe in a situation where we're with friends or with family or talking and sitting, you continue to eat even when your body has told you that it's full. And so maybe ask for a to-go box right away, put half of the meal away, and then eat slowly. Enjoy your meal and enjoy the conversation and the company of the people that you are with. And then kind of the last little tip series section is what it looks like to eat in a dining hall. And dining halls can be super overwhelming because it oftentimes means that you've paid for your meals in advance. We can get into this mentality that we have to think, I kind of have to get my money's worth because I've already paid this, especially for those who have suffered with kind of food insecurities before. This can definitely be a temptation. And so I would recommend that you kind of take a loop all the way around the dining hall before you make any decisions. This will help you just to kind of look through your options, decide what it is that you're really wanting to eat, and then maybe go to that salad bar first. Not because you need to eat a salad every day, but because it might give you a good base to kind of create a meal off of. If we remember back to that My Plate, half of our plate should be those vegetables and fruits. And so if we put those on first, that will help us to make healthier choices when we're getting kind of the rest of our plate filled out. Choose a healthy protein, things like grilled chicken or turkey or even fish. Look for those options. Grabbing a piece of fruit to go is really helpful as well. It may help you later on during the day when maybe you get hungry from choosing something like a bag of chips or even a soda. Having that ready and accessible is very helpful later on throughout the day. Practicing those mindful eating tips like we talked about, maybe grab a group of friends and sit and enjoy whatever break you have maybe throughout your day and really kind of be present with the food and be present with whatever company you're with. Limit the unlimited amount. So like I said, there is nobody telling you how much you can get or how much you can't get. And so being mindful of really what you need in that moment and being aware even of those sometimes foods as well. So things like the brownies and the cookies and the ice cream or french fries. These foods are definitely okay to enjoy and should be enjoyed. But when we're consuming them every single day, it kind of actually takes away from the specialness of those foods and ultimately then leads to kind of habitual eating choices that typically just aren't best for our bodies. The very last thing that we're going to talk about is the things that we drink. And a lot of times people kind of dissociate this from nutrition because they think that eating and drinking are really two different things. But just because you can't see the sugar, just because you aren't actually chewing on the ingredients that are in these drinks, doesn't mean that it isn't there and doesn't mean that it doesn't count towards your overall nutrition, because it definitely does. A sugar sweetened beverage is any beverage with added caloric sweetener, things like soda, carbonated soft drinks, juice drinks, punches, sports drinks, energy drinks, even sweetened milk or milk alternatives. And most sugar sweetened beverages add calories without providing any nutritional benefit. So remember we talked about those empty calories. A lot of times our empty calories do come from the things that we drink. And so really, ultimately, the best choice for us to be choosing is water. Our bodies are made of over 70% water. It helps to kind of cleanse our body. It allows our digestion to work better. It regulates our temperature. It's good for our brain. And dehydration really is kind of one of the main things that can cause headaches or other kind of negative health outcomes. A lot of times if you have a headache, if the first thing that you do is drink water, that's going to immediately kind of relieve you from some of those symptoms. I think it's really important to talk about energy drinks as well here, because as you enter into college or even the workforce, a lot of times people talk about not getting enough sleep or constantly being busy, and so that requires additional caffeine. I would say things to consider is um, consuming a lot of these drinks may contribute to unnecessary or unwanted weight gain. And actually, too much caffeine can cause things like nervousness or irritability, insomnia. It can affect your heart rate and even your blood pressure. It's very, very important that you never mix energy drinks with alcohol. Energy drinks are stimulants and alcohol is a depressant. And when those two are combined, it really is kind of a recipe for disaster. Um, Fatigue might also be caused by underlying health issues. So if you're constantly feeling like you're tired, then you may need to consider something else as well. You maybe even need to consult with a doctor if you're constantly feeling like you need caffeine. And so really that's kind of all that we have for today for this presentation. I know that there is a ton more that actually does go into nutrition and physical wellness that we didn't really get a chance to talk about today. But like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions, I really hope that today was kind of a practical teaching tool for you to be able to take with you for the rest of life. Really, these things will increasingly become more important for you as you have more autonomy in the choices that you're making. And ultimately, we just kind of want to simplify it as much as we can, that it goes back to that energy balance, energy in, energy out, kind of going back to the simple my plate diagram, that you're consuming more fruits and veggies than you are consuming of other types of foods, that you're limiting processed foods and sugars and things like that. And then understanding that even the way that we consume food, those mindful eating things can help our overall health and our digestion as well. So I hope that today was helpful and educational. And like I said, if you have questions, feel free to comment or to ask your teacher, and hopefully they'll be able to kind of get you answers to those questions as well.